So Sam Comfort went to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And I said I'd love to hear about his trip, and so I was thrilled when he walked through that door late, but he got here. So Sam Comfort has the floor to tell us about his mission to Jamaica.
Shall we all talk about bees for a little bit?
Yeah.
Bees. That's why we're here. But I was approached months and months ago from a family from Jamaica who were getting grant money through USAID, Partners of the Americas Farmer to Farmer program. They are starting a top bar beekeeping movement in Jamaica. Jamaica's been pretty much all Langstroth commercial since the get-go. Well, the Spanish originally brought skeps there in the late 1500s, even before any bees were brought to the mainland of the U.S. in the early 1600s. The Spanish were bringing bees all around the Caribbean and even here probably in South Florida, late 1500s. But pretty much the entire country of Jamaica is all Langstroth beekeepers, and it's, you know, more honey, more money, and people haven't really branched out to look at alternatives. But the average wage for the average person in Jamaica is about $15 a day. That's American dollars. It's not much there, so top bars really make sense. A lot of their lumber is imported to the islands. It's expensive to build hives, but most people who keep bees are building their own Langstroth equipment. So I went over, I spent 3 weeks there. I got back on Monday. I was picked up at the airport by a 6'8" Rasta man named Quao. He was unmistakable. And I stayed with his family for 3 weeks. They were my host family. They have about 40 top bar hives that they've gotten going in the last 2 years. They brought in top bar beekeepers from around the U.S. as mentors through this USAID program. They had Les Crowder from New Mexico and a couple other people. So it was a blast, as you can imagine. I went to every parish around the entire island, up into the hills, places where white people had obviously not been in a long time, but I had a blast. And just like, you know, it's the global beekeeping family is one that you are all part of. You can go anywhere in the world, even with language barriers and everything. They speak patois in Jamaica. It's kind of an African English, so it was difficult for me to understand, but it didn't, you know, didn't stop us from talking about bees. So it was great to go and see. They've had a tough year in Jamaica. They got hit by Hurricane Sandy last year, and it kind of wiped out the forage right at the start of their main flow, which is on in January. They get a mango bloom. They get logwood trees is one of their main honey flows. I don't know if there are any naturalized logwoods here in South Florida, but all through the Caribbean are these hardy logwood trees. It's a big honey flow. But they also have a time of dearth that we do, kind of July, August, but it's a really good beekeeping territory, beekeeping climate. It's very mountainous and rugged, so they have a lot of diversity of plants, and bees do really well there. I spent 3 days with the largest beekeeper in Jamaica. He runs about 600 hives. He still uses Apistan. Generally, everyone uses Apistan in Jamaica. It's a highly restricted product. You actually have to get a prescription to get Apistan from their Ministry of Agriculture. And they've been using it for 15 years.
Explain what is it?
Apistan, yeah, people don't even talk about it in this country anymore because it doesn't work anymore. Apistan is fluvalinate. It was the first major registered product to kill varroa mites in our country. It worked here in the U.S. for about 3 or 4 years. Fluvalinate is the active ingredient in Apistan. Then it stopped working. The mites had developed resistance to it. And then Kumafos, the check mite product, came available, which is even a nastier organophosphate, replaced Apistan pretty much, but that doesn't work anymore to kill mites either. Mites very quickly establish resistance to these drugs. Because here in the States, beekeepers were putting in another strip, and then the next year they try to say that worked pretty well, let's put in 2 strips this year. And then they start putting in 3 or 4 strips, and then they never take them back out like they're supposed to on the product label. And so sometimes you find a super or something that has 5 Apistan or 5 check mite strips, and then, but not so in Jamaica because you need a prescription to get it. It's been highly regulated. They have a pretty strict inspection policy that makes sure you take it out after the 30 or 40 days. And so they've been using Apistan for over 15 years, and it still is pretty effective at killing mites because it was done according to labels. But of course we know that fluvalinate and also its replacement, the Kumafos, go into the beeswax and pretty much stay there. They never break down. They leave residual in the beeswax comb. And that's why all of the commercial beeswax you buy in this country is tainted with fluvalinate and coumaphos. The major purchaser in the country of beeswax here is the cosmetic industry, and they will not buy U.S. beeswax. They buy all their wax from Africa for making makeups and salves like that. In Africa, they've never used Apistan or Checkmate. But Apistan is still being used and still effective in Jamaica, and you can't convince people to get off of it, you know. They're so terrified of losing their bees. But a curious thing about Jamaica, and the reason for this top bar movement and like the interest in going this alternative route, was that the country of Jamaica has banned all bee product imports. There is no foreign honey or foreign wax going into Jamaica right now in this past year because they want to prevent CCD, colony collapse disorder. They think there could be a disease or something in that honey or wax. And so it has its pros and cons, like anything. For one thing, beekeepers in Jamaica get a very good price for their honey, considering that the average worker makes $15 a day. Their honey price is pretty decent, and somebody with 100 hives or 200 hives can make a viable living just selling honey and support a family. So banning foreign honey has just helped with that price. But banning wax coming in means that commercial beekeepers, or any beekeepers, cannot get foundation unless they make it themselves. They've always bought foundation pretty much from the US and brought it in. So now people are making their own foundation and figuring out how to do that. But the Jamaican government and the group that I stayed with that brought me there is really advocating top bar hives. The government has actually considered mandating that for every 10 Langstroth hives that are registered, 1 top bar hive must be kept to keep the country's wax production up. I don't know if they'll actually go with that, but it seems like ridiculous that they're not going to legally make people keep top bar hives. So I spoke to over 12 different clubs, I think, over the island, averaging 20 to 30 participants. A lot of young beekeepers, a lot of brand new beekeepers, just like in America. And a lot of people who want to take it to the next step, who want to make more honey, more money, and do this as a viable income. It's not just like a hobby or like something you do that's environmental in your backyard, just as a novelty thing. In Jamaica, they really want to see some results. So,
hey, what I'm doing is not a novelty, buddy.
Yeah, never. But, so I was definitely geared at doing that, but also, doing my usual spiel how like this is supposed to be fun. If we don't make this attractive and just maintain our sense of wonder every day, everyone's going to get burnt out, and you're not going to have any beekeepers in the future. But so I think they got that point. But also, I was teaching a couple tricks for combining hives, letting them raise their own queens. To boost honey production. So I was focusing on honey production, teaching that top bar beekeeping, all kinds of management, and also queens. It's interesting, there is no queen industry in Jamaica. You can't just like call somebody and buy a queen. Nobody raises queens or cages queens or sells them. Beekeepers have always just made their own splits with eggs. That's how everyone does it, like that. So they have maintained this pretty broad genetic base across the island. But there seems to be a lot of potential for a bee industry to sell queens and raise queens. So we did a little bit of grafting, a little bit of showing people how to raise queens naturally, have natural cells and cut them out. And so a lot of things were changing, I felt, when I got there. This whole top bar movement, most of these clubs have been shown a top bar hive or even given a top bar hive through US aid. And we did some conversions. We had nice frames that fit into the top bar, so we could just cut out some Langstroth comb and put it to start some of the top bars, which we did while I was there. And people are into it. We have yet to see some results because it's been a down year in Jamaica, but come December, January, the main flow will get started. And I'll go back. The bees weren't bad. The bees are just bees. No.
So Africanized thing is?
No, there are supposedly no Africanized bees in Jamaica. But they're, different temperaments across the board, just like here.
Did you wear a veil?
I did put on a veil.
Ah!
I didn't get that picture though, so there's no proof. Yes,
what did they put in the smokers?
Exactly. What I like to say, these are a gateway bug.
What's the ideal top bar hive size? Like 4 foot?
Most of the family that I was staying with, which are the biggest top bar beekeepers in Jamaica, they're like the only ones that have been doing it. Virtually everyone's Langstroth. They were doing 5-foot hives, which was great. That they could keep up. They had plenty. They were feeding with baggies when I was there, just plastic baggies in the back, so they had plenty of room in their growing hives. But a lot of people on their Langstroth use excluders and keep just a single brood nest, some smaller hives like that. But yeah, I mean, they had nukes, the tiny ones, but really like a 4-foot hive or a 5-foot hive is probably your best bet. You know, more bees make more honey. You know, the box with the most bees in it wins. That's what I told them. So.
Any idea what's the world's record for the largest top bar hive?
I don't know. I've gotten some out of roofs that kind of like top bar hives that will go 10 feet. You know, it's like they grow and grow. Bees grow and they swarm and swarm. But over
years, do you like to use as far as a 4-foot or a 5-foot? Do you have a preference?
I don't know. Most of mine are at 3 feet that I keep here, but I split them all the time. Split. But
you get a lot of honey out when I say that small, though.
yeah, well, I mean, certain times of year that even here, I mean, there is like the days are getting longer and shorter, even though it's not as intense as like in a temperate environment. And in the first half of the year, the bees are brooding up, and then the second half of the year, you see less wax production but more honey storage. Even here, in the subtropics. So you need a lot of room in a hive of drawn comb for them to store all that nectar before they even start to evaporate it.